Welcome to Shift Happens Week 77.
So today we're going to have a little conversations about vaccinations and immunizations. And I had an experience in my office yesterday. A mother came in with her 3 kids, and all 3 kids had severe food allergies, and all 3 were bedwetters. All 3 had weakened immune systems and were frequently challenged with different illnesses. And the oldest was autistic. He also had strabismus, which is cross-eyedness. And sure enough, they were vaccinated and immunized. And I didn't want to make the mother feel guilty of that, because what's done is done. So I just kept my mouth shut. But after a few minutes of discussion, she came out and asked me, "Do you think this is because my children are vaccinated?" And I said, "Absolutely, but yes." And she looked down, and I could tell that she felt guilty. And she says, "Well, the only reason I did is because my husband is an OB, and that is what he's taught, and that's what he preaches." And I said, "Well, you need to do your own research and make informed decisions." And she says, "Well, this is really on my mind, because next week we're going to be flying to China to adopt a daughter, and we need to be up on our vaccines before we go. What do you think I should do?" And so we had a discussion about that, but I thought maybe as mothers we could talk about our experiences with that.
I think what's interesting with our son, he's the only one of our 3 kids that has a medical exemption signed off. And the reason he does is because when he started school, I had, my philosophical or whatever waiver to sign. And I started thinking about when I did my research. My son at 6 weeks had eczema, which if you listen to the TV, there's no cure for it. There is, it's called Chiropractic, but that's another Shift Happens. But in my research, I found that the DTP, one of the side effects that, granted, you don't ever get told about, because you get told, inflammation around the injection site, maybe a fever, and a fussy baby. Well, if you read a little bit further, one of the side effects was eczema. And I thought, good Lord, he had it without anything in his body. What would he have been if I injected those chemicals, those just gross, nasty things? And I went to his pediatrician. I said, sign it or don't sign it. But what, in your medical opinion, would he have been at risk for high, adverse reactions? 2 things that scare me. Number one, she didn't realize that eczema was a side effect. And she did sign off on it because she found it. When you make the decision, please do not assume that your doctors know a lot. When I did the research for myself, I couldn't find a specific course that a medical doctor had to take on vaccines. They have it in some of their courses, but if a pediatrician, majority of what they do is administer vaccines, in my opinion, they should know ins and outs, how they work, and everything.
There should be hours of course study.
It should be hours of course study, because that's what they do. That was 10 years ago. If it's changed, look it up. But if it hasn't, know what to ask. And there were some things that we asked ours, she didn't know how to answer. When we showed her our stuff, she went, "Yeah, I see where you're coming from."
So even if it has changed, don't you think that in their continuing ed, if they're going to administer the toxin that they're going to put into the body, by law, they should know what they're putting into the body in every
That's part of their continuing
I,
ed.
I would agree. Yeah. So don't assume that they have a high education. There's a commercial going on right now that drives me absolutely bonkers, because there's 2 of them. You can tell yours, I'll tell mine. It goes on, and it's these grandpa and grandma voices on what I have seen. I don't want my grandchild to see what I saw. And they're talking about mumps and measles. And I thought, gal, my mom, she's almost 60, she had them. I've asked her what it was like, and she said we made fun of the siblings because they were puffy. There's not horrible, horrible stories. This many maybe had a tough time. Don't let fear make your decision. Make an educated, logical choice. What are in those vaccines? And instead of it going through all our body's natural filters, we stick it as deep as it can go, that the body would never let it go. So you have to understand, number one, it's a vaccination, not an immunization. The only thing that immunizes, that means lifetime. That's when our body contracts it naturally. So correct your doctor on that. It's not an immunization, it's a vaccination. And don't assume they know more. ask questions, and make a decision on what's the best choice.
As mothers, you have a responsibility to make an informed decision and to research things. You cannot just trust any doctor to make that decision for you. You must research it, and you have to do your homework before doing that.
No, go ahead, Sean. Then we'll have Ashley tell her story.
You know, when our daughter was born, almost 19 years ago, our decision was already made what we were going to do, and we knew we were not going to vaccinate her. It wasn't even on the table of discussion. And we met a lot of negative feelings from our families, especially the grandmas involved, and they were very vocal about their opinions of vaccinating, and they thought we were wrong. And they did listen, they did back off. Then the more that my mom actually listened to what we had to say and the adverse reactions, and I have a brother that has struggled with asthma, and she told me that if she had known about the information that we were giving her at this point in time, when we were little as little kids, she would have never ever done it, and nobody could have ever forced her into doing it, and she regrets every single shot that we got. And at the point, you know, when we were kids, you only got 3 or 4, and now you get...
You had 20 by the time you were 5, and now you have 90-some by the time you're 5.
3 or 4 at a time.
So...
Which, by the way, they don't ever study if that's safe or effective, and when they stop doing that is usually when there's a lot of deaths, and that's just the facts.
And you're going to hear a lot of, if your kids can't go to school if they're not vaccinated, which is absolutely not true. You're going to hear people say they don't want to be around you if you're not vaccinated. Well, you know, if they're the ones that are vaccinated, then they don't have anything to fear from me.
They're the ones
or
putting
my daughter.
our children at
Right.
risk
Our
in
kids
reality.
should be.
If
Yeah,
you
Have
have
so
so
much
much,
that should be afraid to put our children
if
out
you have
there.
so much faith in that vaccination, then what are you scared of? If you really think that, you know, there obviously has that doubt and that fear in your mind if you're really worried about being around a child that's not vaccinated.
But a decision should never be made out of fear.
Mm-hmm.
A decision should be made out of education. And you're not always going to get the education from a medical doctor who is being paid to inject your child. And if it is so safe, are they going to sign off on it that if there is an adverse reaction, who is going to be financially responsible for what happens afterwards? And you don't just have the finances, but now you have children that are not going to be able to live the rest of their life the way they were meant to live it, and there's going to be repercussions. You're going to spend a lifetime taking care of a child that may not ever be able to go out and be self-sufficient because you let someone fear you into a decision.
With that, I want to address the parents that might be on the fence, the parents that, you know, aren't brought up with that support system, you know, and aren't educated in the vaccinations. I was a bad parent because I didn't want to have my children vaccinated. I don't know how many times I've been called a bad parent from that standpoint. But that's how I was raised. We were all vaccinated as kids, and you know what? We all got sick. I had asthma. We all had our symptoms of different things that came from one thing or another. Couldn't have been vaccinations.
Normal childhood illnesses.
Yeah, exactly.
I love that
It's
one.
normal to have to suffer as a child, But anyway, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, right?
Right.
So,
Exactly.
But everybody kind of knows my story if you've seen previous shifts and everything with my children. My oldest, Sean, he had some of his vaccinations and he's had some issues. My daughter, Natalie, at the point when I was being pressured and I wasn't as educated, I got her fully vaccinated. She's had every single one of her shots. She is my child that is sick all the time. She had eczema. She is getting adjusted now. She's doing a lot better, but she's had a lot of things that she's had to battle. She's had respiratory infections. She's had